Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're stepping away just a little from the everyday noise. We're choosing a quieter path, I think, a more intimate one. We want to move into this really reflective space together and look at an ache. An ache that, if we're being really honest with ourselves, almost everyone knows.
Yeah.
Deep down, it's that strange, persistent magnetic pull. Right back toward the very people. Well, the ones who've caused us the most profound pain.
Yes. It is a profound confusion of the heart, isn't it? And it often brings up feelings of shame, maybe foolishness. We judge ourselves for it, but we really need to try and set that judgment aside just for now. This quiet ache you described, living between memory and this deep longing. It isn't weakness. It's not foolishness either. It's something much, much older, a pattern. Woven deeply into the fabric of our being, you could say.
Yeah, I know that moment. And I imagine you listening, you probably recognize it too. Your phone lights up. It's that name. The one you swore you'd blocked, archived forever, or maybe you just see an old photo unexpectedly, and your finger just hovers over the screen. Your heart does that little flip and whispers that really seductive, dangerous phrase. Just one more time. It's this intense urge, this need almost to reach out to the very hand that bruised us, to see comfort in the voice that maybe shattered our trust. It's bewildering.
It is. It truly is. But I think we can understand the mechanism behind it. We should probably bring in the central metaphor right away because it helps explain this confusion. It's the story of the moth circling the flame. Now, when we watch the moth, we assume it's seeking destruction, right? Flying straight into danger. But it isn't. Not really. The moth is seeking warmth. It's seeking light. It seeks a focal point, something familiar in all that overwhelming darkness. We are that moth. Often. We're flying towards an intensity, a brightness, maybe a dangerous focus that our nervous system somehow has learned to confuse with real intimacy, with safety.
Oh, that's such a crucial distinction. That's really important. We're not actually seeking the pain itself. We're seeking something that feels like home, like belonging, even if it's, well, a perverse form of it.
Yeah.
Because it feels so intensely real.
Well, exactly. Precisely. And so our mission today, in this deep dive, it's really just to see this pattern clearly, without the shame, without the judgment. It's meant to be a gentle exploration, looking into why our internal architecture, our nervous systems, our emotional history, why it gets trained sometimes to confuse that turbulence with genuine belonging, and crucially, how we can finally start to cultivate internal stability, how we can choose stillness, maybe self-trust, over that addictive, predictable rhythm of our past pain.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's begin that exploration. So, all right, if we're saying the pain often feels repetitive, like a cycle, we first need to unpack this deep sense of familiarity you mentioned. It's almost structural, the rhythm of the pain, knowing the cycle. Somehow that feels safer than, the silence, the unknown, or maybe the risk of real stillness. Where does this architecture of conditioning, where does it really begin?
Well, it absolutely begins with repetition, just as you said. That's the basic language of the SIA system. When pain, or maybe more accurately, the pattern of pain, then maybe reconciliation, then pain again. When that's repeated over and over, it stops feeling like a random event. It becomes a rhythm, a known quantity. And for the nervous system, predictability. Well, however harsh it might be, however toxic, it often registers as safer than total uncertainty, safer than stillness, or the unpredictable nature of real change. We tend to fear the unknown silence more than the familiar noise, even if the noise hurts.
Can you give maybe a practical example, how this childhood lesson might actually play out? Because usually we aren't explicitly taught, love equals suffering. It's subtler.
Oh, it's almost always implicit. Much more subtle, yes. Think about a child, perhaps, who only gets comfort or real attention or maybe just a moment of focused presence from a caregiver only after a meltdown or after showing profound need, extreme distress. So if love or attention or comfort only arrived after the tears, after showing how much they were suffering or striving, then the unconscious lesson gets set immediately, very deeply. And the lesson is, love isn't gentle. It's not just freely given, it has conditions.
Okay, so the lesson becomes, love is something you have to earn. Through endurance, you have to strive for it or chase it or prove your persistence just to be seen, to be worthy.
Precisely. That's it exactly. And this becomes the profound tragedy that often plays out in our adult lives. The adult then unconsciously seeks out relationships that replicate that original dynamic. It feels familiar. They might seek partners who withhold affection, or who wound them, or who force them to prove their worth again and again, or maybe partners who are just chronically unavailable, emotionally or physically, because that struggle, that high-stakes striving, that's the only version of connection they've ever really known. That demanding, turbulent landscape somehow feels like home, even though it's incredibly painful and deeply destabilizing.
Right, and that's the core confusion we keep circling back to. Mistaking intensity for intimacy. We think we're choosing love or passion, but we're actually drawn to the dynamic that demands we strive. Because deep down, maybe we're still looking for that version of ourselves. The one that can finally win the approval we never got, the unwinnable prize from the past. Our sources mention this persistence isn't punishment, but something called karma as echo. Can you explain that? How should we understand that difference?
Yes, that's a vital distinction. It helps to stop seeing karma as some kind of external judge handing out punishments. Karma, in this context, is much simpler, more intuitive, really. It's just momentum. Think of it like that.
Right.
It's the continuation of a dynamic, a pattern maybe striving, chasing, withdrawing, and until that pattern is finally seen clearly and then interrupted, consciously. Our past actions, our thoughts, the emotions we felt so deeply in our history, they create this powerful emotional gravity in the present. So if we don't consciously choose a different path, a new way, the force of that gravity just pulls us back onto the most traveled road, the familiar one. It's simply the natural consequence of energy continuing along its path of least resistance.
Okay, momentum and
Yeah.
echo, not punishment. That makes sense. And that path of least resistance, that leads us to a really foundational concept in our material today. The Sanskrit term, samskara, it sounds like it relates directly to this momentum, like the energetic expression of it. Can you define what samskara is, maybe why it makes breaking these patterns feel so incredibly difficult?
Yes. Samskara is absolutely key to understanding this gravitational pull we feel. It refers to the subtle impressions left behind by every thought, every word, every emotional habit we have. Think of them like footprints we leave in wet clay. When we first have a thought or feel an emotion in a certain way, it's just a soft impression, barely there. But over time, as these patterns get repeated, the cycle of arguing, the emotional shutdown, the intense chasing, then the brief reunion, those footprints deepen. They get walked over again and again, and they harden. They become these permanent automatic pathways in our minds, like deep grooves.
Wow, so the mind just starts following these hardened grooves instinctively, almost without us realizing it.
Exactly, yes. Imagine water following the path of a riverbed, one that's been carved out over centuries. The water doesn't really choose its path, does it? The geology, the shape of the land, dictates where it goes. In much the same way, when a new relationship possibility comes up, or maybe just when we're faced with silence or uncertainty, our mind automatically slides into the deepest emotional groove it knows, the most familiar riverbed. And here's the crucial part. We start to confuse the shape of the wound for the shape of belonging, the intensity of that old pattern, the familiar ache of unworthiness it triggers. It starts to feel like a confirmation of who we are, our identity. And it's incredibly difficult to stop following that riverbed because for so long, that turbulent river was our sense of self.
So the really kind of gentle realization here, maybe profound, is that in that moment when we're tempted to reach out again to the person who hurt us, we're not actually actively choosing them in that instant. We're more just sliding into an old, deeply etched groove because the inertia, the momentum of the samskara is just so powerful.
That is the insight, yes. And it allows for compassion. We need to view ourselves with that compassion, recognizing the pull is almost infrastructural. It's built in a way. Liberation doesn't come from fighting the pattern head on necessarily. It comes from illuminating the infrastructure itself, understanding how it keeps running.
Okay, so section 1 laid out the architecture, familiarity, momentum, these deep grooves, the samskaras. Now this next part, we need to look at the driving force, the energy behind it all, that powerful, almost chemical feeling that we mistake for true love or connection or maybe even destiny. Our sources seem to draw a really clear line between what we call love in these cyclical, often painful dynamics and what real unconditional love actually is.
Yes, we absolutely must deepen our understanding here. What exactly are we grasping for in those moments? In the Buddhist tradition, there's a vital distinction made. What most of us label as love or intense longing in these kinds of desperate, cyclical, painful relationships is very often something called tanha.
Tanha, okay, and that translates roughly to craving or grasping, is that right?
It's more than just simple desire, though. It's helpful to see it as an energetic reaching outside of ourselves. Tana is this frantic, grasping desire, and it's rooted in need, a sense of lack. It's desperately trying to fill an inner void, maybe a lack of validation, a feeling of incompleteness, trying to fill it with another person's presence or their validation or hoping they'll change. And this is critically different from metta. Metta is pure, selfless, unconditional loving kindness. It asks for nothing in return. It flows outward freely. Tana, on the other hand, is possessive. It's conditional. It's rooted in the anxiety of not having.
Okay, that really helps explain the paradox.
Yeah.
Because when the person has already hurt us, the craving, the tana, it seems to get even more intense, doesn't it?
That's
If
right.
they've already proven they can't really meet the need, why does the grasping get stronger instead of weaker?
Because something else enters the equation. A powerful motivator. The need for closure. That need becomes the primary fuel for the tanha. The unresolved pain, maybe from a sudden loss, a betrayal, an abandonment, it creates this immense vacuum inside. This is what we can think of as the phantom limb of the heart. You know how when a physical limb is lost, the brain still sends signals to it. It causes this painful ache, a sensation in the empty space where the limb used to be.
Ah, I see. So the same thing happens emotionally. The relationship, or maybe the future we hope for with that person, it's gone. But the emotional space it used to fill still aches. It feels empty and wrong.
Precisely. And it doesn't ache for the person as they are right now, maybe unavailable, hurtful, chaotic. It aches for a different outcome, a different ending to the story. It aches for the resolution that never came, for the story to be rewritten in a way where we finally mattered enough, where we were finally seen, truly seen, or maybe where the person finally changed, stabilized, became who we needed them to be. The phantom limb demands an ending that confirms our inherent worth, which we felt was denied.
Right. So that internal monologue just keeps running on a loop. This time, if I'm just more forgiving, or more patient, or if I say the perfect thing, find the magic words, or if I become more perfect myself, more compliant, then the story will finally change. It has to. We're basically trying to heal the past by forcing the present relationship to give us a different history. We're asking the flame, please just warm me this time. Don't burn me.
And that very attempt, trying to compel the present to heal the past, that is the absolute root of continued dukkha, continued suffering. The core Buddhist truth here, the insight that offers a way out, is this. Suffering doesn't end by replaying the past, trying to force a different outcome. It ends by seeing the past clearly, seeing the pattern for what it is.
Clarity. Okay, that's the pivot point again. But when we talk about clarity in this context, this really sensitive personal space, it feels so easy to slip straight into self-blame. Judgment. I should have known better. I'm so stupid for going back again. That kind of thing.
Clarity is not judgment, and it's definitely not shame. Those are just more layers of suffering. True clarity is a quiet, compassionate witnessing. It needs deep self-honesty, yes, but also gentleness. It's like a gentle breath of realization that simply says, okay, this is why I keep returning. Not because I'm fundamentally flawed or broken, but because I'm still holding on to the hope of healing that younger version of myself. The version that was taught implicitly that love had to be earned through pain or striving or fixing someone else. We're essentially seeking to rewrite an ancient history, a history that was never truly ours to write in the first place. It belonged to our caregivers, our circumstances.
Wow, that feels so much gentler and actually liberating. It reframes the whole struggle. It's not a moral failure. It's just acknowledging an old survival mechanism that's still running. So when that finger is hovering over the phone screen, that moment of temptation, the breath of realization comes when we manage to pause just for a second and gently ask that one question. What am I truly reaching for right now, in this exact moment?
Exactly. And if you listen very, very closely beneath the noise of the craving, the answer is rarely the person themselves as they are now. It's almost always the memory of feeling almost seen, or maybe the brief relief that came after the pain, in the reconciliation phase, the temporary calm after the storm. We mistake the intensity of that whole cycle for the depth of the love, the awareness of that distinction, understanding that the longing is really a longing for internal wholeness, for peace, for self-worth, which we are projecting outward onto someone who simply cannot provide it. That awareness, that's the moment we start to reclaim our personal agency. That's when we can begin, finally, to walk away from the flame, not towards it.
It's really fascinating how this ancient wisdom seems to map so perfectly onto our modern understanding of psychology. It's uncanny sometimes. Things the Buddhist thinkers observed about craving and conditioning, samskaras, momentum, thousands of years ago. Modern psychology is now confirming through biochemistry, neuroscience, attachment theory. Let's maybe start with the modern perspective that describes the mechanism, the thing driving that immediate urge to return, trauma bonding.
Yes, trauma bonding gives us the clinical language for this emotional treadmill we find ourselves on. It describes the biochemical loop that's powered almost entirely by intermittent reinforcement. Now, intermittent reinforcement, just to be clear, is that cycle. Kindness after cruelty, attention after neglect, calm after chaos, this highly unstable, unpredictable pattern. Scientifically, it's known to create an addiction that's actually stronger than consistent reward. It's counterintuitive, but true.
Right, because it's driven by the neurochemistry of hope, isn't it? It's not the good moment itself that gets us hooked. It's the anticipation, the maybe, the hope for the good moment returning. Because the relationship is so unpredictable, the nervous system stays on high alert, constantly braced for either danger or reward. And dopamine, that pleasure chemical, it gets released most intensely during the uncertainty, during that high-stakes, maybe next time feeling. It creates this intense addiction to the hope itself, to the maybe.
That intermittent validation is incredibly confusing. It keeps the nervous system trapped in this state of hypervigilance. And in that state, we very quickly learn to confuse turbulence and that high alert intensity with truth, with genuine connection, with passion. The great paradox here is that consistent, secure, calm love often feels alien. Or even, as you sometimes hear people say, boring. No, not because it lacks depth, but because it doesn't generate that intense hormonal rush the system got used to. Now, the antidote offered in the Dharma for this kind of inner turbulence is upekkha, equanimity.
Equanimity. Okay. I think most people hear that word and they think, oh, I should just stop caring, or I need to become cold, detached. If we're trying to stop confusing turbulence for truth, how do we actually cultivate real upekkha without just becoming emotionally distant or maybe unavailable ourselves in future healthier relationships?
That's a critical question, a really important distinction to make. Upekkha is absolutely not indifference. Indifference is closing down. It's emotional disengagement. It's like building a defensive wall around the heart. Equanimity, by contrast, is about cultivating a steady heart, a heart that's centered and stable in its own truth. It's no longer tossed about by the winds of external forces, by other people's whims, demands, or their toxicity. It's really a kind of cultivated compassion that recognizes the impermanence of everything, including the pain someone else might cause us, and including the immediate emotional reaction we feel rising up in response. It sees it all, but isn't swept away by it.
So it's like finding that space, the space between the flame and the moth, where you can actually make a conscious choice.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to put it. When we cultivate equanimity, we stop letting the ghost of the relationship, that old familiar ache, its chemical rush, the tanha, we stop letting it dictate our present actions, our choices right now. We start to realize that the universe continues, the sun still rises, life goes on, even after that specific, bright, maybe destructive flame dies out. We are essentially reclaiming our internal environment, taking back control of our inner state.
And this idea of internal momentum, reclaiming our inner state, it brings us right back to the psychological machinery, what the Buddha called those deep grooves, the samskaras. Modern psychology calls them attachment patterns. The connection seems so direct, so powerful.
It really is the same observation, just viewed through slightly different lenses, different terminology. We tend to fall in love or perhaps become attached, not necessarily with the people themselves as they truly are, but with the familiar dynamic they create, how they make us feel. And that feeling, almost invariably, is a mirror. It reflects our earliest, deepest wounds. It reflects how we learned love was delivered to us as children. If love arrived packaged with inconsistency, maybe chaos, maybe distance, then that's what our system is programmed to seek out. It feels familiar, therefore right.
So the heart just naturally follows these channels carved out by time, by our childhood relationships, our relationship with our first caregivers, whether they were consistently there for us or frighteningly chaotic or cold and distant. That experience created the default pathway. The expectation for how connection is supposed to arrive, how it feels, that's the momentum of karma, the samskara, steering our adult choices without us even realizing it.
And the mind, unconsciously, keeps seeking out scenarios that seem to offer a chance to finally resolve that unresolved past. There's this core, often deeply buried belief. If I can just get love or consistency or validation from this person, this difficult person, this emotionally unavailable person, then I can retroactively heal my past self.
Yeah.
The part of me that felt unseen or abandoned or not good enough back then. We're essentially trying to force our current partner to apologize for or fix the original wound inflicted long ago.
That explains the magnetic pull towards unavailability so perfectly. It's trying to win the unwinnable game from childhood. Let's just quickly ground this in those modern attachment models. Bowlby, Ainsworth. They identified the basic styles, right? Secure, anxious, avoidant, disorganized.
Yeah.
And we see it play out all the time, like the anxious attachment style being so magnetically drawn to the emotionally unavailable avoidant partner. It's that classic pursuer-distancer dynamic.
That dynamic is the samskara in motion. It's the groove playing out. The anxiously attached person is seeking the intensity of the chase, the intermittent reward, because their nervous system learned that attention has to be fought for, earned. Meanwhile, the avoidant person is seeking distance, space, because closeness, vulnerability, That feels like danger to their system. They slot together almost perfectly magnetically, creating maximum friction, maximum turbulence.
And that friction, that turbulence, gets mistaken for passion, for deep connection. While consistency, predictability, the hallmarks of a secure, healthy relationship often feels boring, like you said, or maybe even frightening, unsettling to those with insecure attachment styles. Not because it lacks love, but because it lacks that adrenaline rush. The familiar hormonal cocktail their nervous system learned to equate with necessary connection.
Yes. And it's so crucial to emphasize this again. This patterning isn't a personal flaw. It's not a moral failing. It was, at its root, a strategy for survival.
Yeah.
Developed when we were young and had very little agency or choice. But we must now recognize that survival is not the same thing as thriving. They are different states of being. And the radical shift, the conscious journey from just seeking survival to actively cultivating thriving, that is the path toward liberation, and it requires conscious, deliberate intervention in these old patterns.
Okay, so we've laid out the pattern, the craving, the conditioning,
Yeah.
both ancient and modern takes on it. Now let's talk about that conscious intervention, the radical alternative, as you called it, the practice of liberation. How do we actually practically interrupt this incredibly powerful emotional momentum? Where do we start?
The radical alternative is really this core shift in perspective. We have to stop trying to find freedom by changing other people. That's the external focus. And realize deeply that freedom is actually found in changing our relationship to our own internal patterns. This is the moment we consciously choose to shift away from dukkha, the suffering that's rooted in tanha, that craving born from ignorance of our own inherent wholeness. This is where the truly difficult but rewarding practical work begins, the work of building a new internal foundation, a new identity.
Right. And step one, you said, is mindful recognition. It sounds gentle, mindful recognition, but actually facing that intense emotional pull, that craving with clarity, that must be immensely challenging in the moment.
Oh, it requires immense courage. And discipline. Let's be honest about that. When that familiar pull arises, the ache in the chest, the obsessive thoughts, the impulse to text or call, the urge to check their social media, we must try to pause. Just pause. Create a little space. And critically, we don't judge the feeling itself. Judgment just feeds the shame cycle, makes the impulse stronger. Instead, we try to approach the feeling gently, with profound curiosity, like an explorer. We need to ask ourselves, kindly, what old story is this feeling activating in me right now?
Can we give some concrete examples? What might those old stories sound like?
Absolutely. The stories often feel intensely personal, but they tend to echo universal themes. I have to earn love to be worthy. Or, my life will have no meaning if I end up alone. Or, if I leave this person even though it hurts, I'll never find anyone who loves me in this specific way again. Or maybe, I'm invisible unless I'm struggling to be seen. The absolutely essential realization here is that these powerful, intense internal narratives, they are not current truths about reality, they are echoes. They are the samskaras speaking, voices from the past that are still playing on repeat.
And just realizing that.
Yeah.
That they're echoes, not commands. That's the first step to dissolving their power, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so step two moves from just recognition to a more proactive response. Reparenting yourself through metta, through loving kindness.
Yes. This is about applying that metta, that unconditional warmth and kindness, inward, directly to the wounded child part of ourselves. It's an act of deep self-compassion that can actually begin to shift the nervous system out of a threat response and into a feeling of safety. And this needs to be a profoundly physical, embodied practice, not just an intellectual idea.
How do we actually do that?
Yeah.
Put it into embodied practice when the craving or the panic feels like it's raging inside.
Okay. When the anxiety spikes, when the longing hits hard, we pause again. We can physically place a hand on our heart, or maybe on our belly, somewhere that feels grounding, a physical anchor. We breathe deeply, slowly, into that space. We don't try to intellectually dismiss the pain or talk ourselves out of it immediately. We acknowledge it with profound tenderness, as if we were holding a small, suffering child who is scared or hurting. And then, we deliberately, gently, maybe even whispering aloud or silently inside, we offer the truth the child within needed to hear back then. We create a new neural phrase, a new message. It's okay, you don't have to fix anyone else to be worthy. You are already whole. You are safe now. And this isn't a one-time fix. It has to be done repeatedly, consistently. It needs to become the new groove, the new habit.
That's beautiful. And it connects directly to what we know about neuroplasticity, right? The brain's ability to change. We're literally intentionally carving a new neural pathway, one where love feels calm, consistent, kind, replacing that old turbulent path that somehow equated connection with intensity and struggle.
Yes. every single time you choose self-compassion over self-criticism, or choose that self-affirmation mantra over sending the impulsive text, you are actively weakening the old groove and reinforcing the new one. It's brain training, essentially. Now, the third crucial step, which involves taking this internal shift into external action, is establishing boundary as practice.
Right, boundaries. In the West, we often think of boundaries defensively, like walls we put up, or maybe necessary aggression, pushing back against someone.
But from this perspective, the perspective of liberation and compassion, a healthy boundary is actually an act of absolute clarity and compassion. Compassion for yourself and for the other person, potentially. It's not really about controlling the other person's behavior. It's about honoring your own needs, your own path.
Right.
A boundary becomes a clear statement, maybe spoken or just lived, that says, I honor your path wherever it leads, and I honor mine. And my path, right now, requires a deep commitment to peace, stability, and self-respect. And your current dynamic, or our dynamic together, doesn't support that for me anymore.
Okay, so saying no to the pull, saying no to contact, maybe isn't really a rejection of the other person fundamentally. It's an honoring of the self, a commitment to your own peace.
To self-respect. Cultivated through these deliberate, conscious choices, that becomes the foundation for true connection. Connection that isn't based on craving or need. It starts to create a space where you attract what you embody, peace, stability, self-worth, rather than attracting situations that reflect what you feel you lack.
Okay, and then finally, we have to talk about the difficulty of just sitting in the void. Once the boundary is set, it's not enough just to say no, right? We have to cultivate the internal peace, the resilience to actually hold that boundary, to endure the silence, maybe the loneliness, the ache that inevitably follows breaking such a powerful pattern.
Yes, and here we can remember the powerful story of Angulimala, the terrifying bandit who wore a necklace of fingers. When the Buddha encountered him on the road, Angulimala was shocked because the Buddha wasn't running away in fear like everyone else. He challenged the Buddha, shouting, "Stop, monk! Why aren't you running? Don't you see I have stopped you?" And the Buddha replied, calmly and simply, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped. Running, chasing, causing harm."
Wow, that moment of realization. I have stopped.
Healing truly begins when we stop. When we stop running from the discomfort of our own internal void, our own unmet needs, and when we stop chasing the illusion that someone else, anyone else can fill it for us, we have to be willing to sit with the discomfort, with the anxiety of the sudden silence, the space where the drama used to be, and breathe into it. This is the real alchemy of awareness. By offering that internal pain, the loneliness, the fear, the sense of lack, the love, the stability, the validation we've been desperately seeking externally, we begin to transform it from within. We need to stop giving our personal power away, stop believing that another person's presence or absence or approval defines our ultimate worth or happiness.
So we've journeyed through the architecture, the craving, the practices.
Yeah.
And we've reached the culmination, really, the moment the spell finally breaks. And like you said, it's often not this dramatic thunderclap, it's more subtle, like dawn slowly filtering through a cracked window, quiet certainty settling in.
Yes, the realization is often quiet, but it's certain. And utterly transformative when it lands. It's that moment you realize you're simply no longer reaching for the hand that hurt you. Not out of anger, maybe not even out of conscious effort anymore, but simply because you've stopped believing deep down that that person holds some exclusive key to your internal wholeness. The key is already inside you.
And this connects back to that Buddhist concept we touched on, Avijja. Ignorance, or maybe better, misseeing. We suffer because we mistake the painful cycle for something pleasurable or necessary. We mistake the conditional promise for a true certainty.
And this misseeing is often most potent in that illusion, that belief that love has to hurt to be real, or the idea that only someone who mirrors our past dysfunction can truly understand or see us. We keep getting drawn back by that flicker of hope. This time, maybe I'll finally be enough for them to change, for them to see me. But that hope, we realize, is just a cry, an echo from our own unhealed past self, still seeking external validation.
Right, and the fundamental turning point, the truth that has to be internalized is, you cannot heal a wound by repeatedly, deliberately reopening it. It just doesn't work. Familiarity feels like it should lead to resolution, but it's usually just painful repetition disguised as destiny.
True healing requires turning that intense energy, that longing, inward. We can actually utilize the profound compassion practice from the Tibetan tradition, Tonglen giving and taking, and radically redirect it towards ourselves. When the ache rises, when the phantom limb throbs, breathe in your own pain, acknowledge it fully, the deep sorrow, the intense need of the past, hold it with kindness, and then breathe out love. Breathe out tenderness, stability, reassurance, strength directly to yourself. You are actively becoming your own caregiver, your own source of warmth and safety.
And when you stop outsourcing your self-worth, stop handing it over to someone who has repeatedly shown they can't or won't hold it safely.
Yeah.
You reclaim your sovereignty, your internal authority. You stop waiting for their apology or for them to change or for their eventual validation that might never come. You stop bargaining with the ghosts of the past.
And in that moment of profound release, that's when you truly meet yourself. Not as the wounded child still desperate for someone outside to fix it, but as the wise, compassionate adult self that has actually been there all along, just waiting patiently to be trusted, to be listened to. Modern psychology might call this earned, secure attachment, the ability to provide for yourself internally what your early environment maybe couldn't. Buddhism calls this development bodhicitta the awakened heart, the compassionate mind. Safety is no longer something you seek out there, it's something you cultivate and guarantee within.
So how do we really anchor this? Anchor this internal shift in our daily lives so it's not just a nice idea. Moving from theory into concrete, repeatable actions. You offered 3 specific practices, I think, for embodying this internal sovereignty.
Yes. 3 practical anchors. First, name the pattern without shame. When you feel that gravitational pull starting again, articulate the mechanism clearly and simply to yourself. Okay, I feel myself being pulled back because I'm trying to fix an old story that was never really mine to fix, or I'm trying to heal the original feeling of abandonment. Just naming the mechanism helps dissolve its unconscious power. It brings it into the light of awareness.
Okay. Name it without shame. Second, interrupt the ritual.
Yes. The moment the impulse arises, the urge to text, to check their profile, to call a mutual friend for information, pause, create that space again. Do not act immediately on the impulse. Place your hand on your heart, maybe, and use a mantra of truth. Something like, this feeling is not love. This is longing for a past that didn't love me well. I choose peace now. Interrupt the automatic behavioral chain.
Interrupt the ritual. And third, replace the ritual with presence.
Exactly. Turn inward instead of outward. Don't just sit there feeling the void left by the interrupted ritual. Don't allow the energy of that craving to just dissipate into emptiness or anxiety. Actively redirect it. Sit in stillness for just 5 or 10 minutes. Or write that letter to your younger self we talked about. Affirm their inherent worth. Tell that younger part of you, you didn't deserve that pain. You never had to earn love. You were always enough exactly as you were. This is the intentional, conscious carving of the new pathway. Building the muscle of self-reliance.
That really feels like soul work, deeply rooted. And it seems to work not because we somehow magically get over the person overnight, but because we stop using them as the primary mirror, reflecting our own perceived unworthiness back at us. The lotus analogy you mentioned feels so relevant here.
It is. The lotus flower, as you know, grows up from the mud, from the dark, murky depths, but it doesn't stay in the mud. It uses the nutrients, the richness of that difficult past to rise above the surface, to bloom into something beautiful. The pain you endured, it undoubtedly shaped you. It taught you things, maybe resilience, maybe empathy, but it does not have to define you. And it certainly doesn't dictate who you become now. Remember the Buddha's interaction with Mara, the personification of illusion and temptation? He didn't try to destroy Mara or fight him or deny his existence. He simply acknowledged him. He said, I see you, Mara. And in that clear seeing, that acknowledgement without fear or entanglement, Mara's power dissolved. Your task isn't to hate or destroy your past. It's simply to stop letting its familiar, heavy gravitational pull steer your future. You get to choose the direction now.
You know, what really stands out to me, wrapping up this deep dive, is that core liberating truth you shared. It feels so central, that the love, the worth, the security, everything you've been searching for, maybe desperately in the distant, sometimes dangerous eyes of another person, has actually been living inside your own heart all along. Just waiting for you to turn towards it, to recognize it, to claim it.
Yes. And freedom ultimately isn't the absence of pain or the erasing of memory. That's not realistic. Freedom is the presence of clarity, absolute clarity. And that clarity allows us to finally state the ultimate boundary, not just externally to others, but internally to our own conditioned mind. I will no longer confuse longing for belonging. I know the difference now.
So maybe the next time that old ache rises up, that familiar magnetic pull of the samskara, the old groove, we invite you, listening, to just pause, to breathe, and maybe hold on to this final, gentle question for yourself. What part of me, deep down, still believes I must suffer or strive or fix someone else to be truly loved?
And then answer that question, not with your intellect trying to figure it out, but answer it with the tenderness of, Ma, Of 1,000 sunrises dawning in your own heart, you don't. You never did. You are loved simply and profoundly because you exist. This is the moment your story can truly begin again. Not as a desperate seeker of conditional love from the outside, but as its steady, unshakable source radiating from within. You will no longer be drawn helplessly to the destructive flames because you will finally realize you are the light that guides yourself and eventually perhaps others safely home.